That's how it has to be scaled up.
Let me bring in Elaine McGoff now, whom you can all see from your programme events has incredibly impressive academic credentials in this area, a very impressive title within An Taisce as well, but I suppose her superpower from the point of view of this conversation is her role in the Sustainable Water Action Network, SWAN. Elaine, do you want to give us your reaction, uninterrupted by me, to what it is that you've heard so far?
Yeah, thank you. At this same conference last year, Ella McSweeney used a phrase which really stuck with me. She said, rivers are the ultimate truth tellers. And we've been hearing about some of that truth here this morning, that almost 50% of our rivers and lakes are polluted. Ireland has lost more wetlands than any other country in the world, 90%. Our emissions are going up, we're losing our biodiversity. And while there are many drivers for that, how we use land use is a significant factor for all of them. The way we use land is killing our waters, it's killing our biodiversity, and it's killing our chances for a livable future. It's an uncomfortable truth, but it's the facts. And we've seen the battle raging over the last few weeks as a result of the nature restoration law proposal by the European Commission, and the response from some quarters has been vociferous in pushing back against it, with very pronounced lobbying of politicians and MEPs to kill the proposal before it even gets out of the starting blocks. We'll find out tomorrow if they have succeeded in that. I've heard tell of Cromwellian evictions and towns and villages being flooded and ethnic cleansing of rural Ireland. It has been quite a reaction, based largely on misinformation and scaremongering, which was allowed to flourish in the absence of actual hard information and facts from our political leaders. So I would see this as a case study in how not to have political discourse or a national discourse like this. Don't do it like this, it doesn't work. But what it really highlighted to me is that we need to have a frank discussion about how we use land in Ireland. How I and others in ENGOs think we should manage our land will differ, I'm sure, from what Dennis would think, would differ again from what other stakeholders would think. There would be as many opinions on this as there is stars in the sky. But to answer it, it's hard to know who's right, but to answer it, we need to return to first principles. We need to look at the evidence, what we know to be true, which is the data on water quality, like the report that we saw published this morning, emissions increases, biodiversity loss. Rivers are the ultimate truth tellers. What are they telling us? And what we're being told in various metrics is that while there is great work underway, like the work you're talking about there, Noel, it's not enough to stem the tide. We're still polluting our air, diminishing our nature, and increasing our emissions. And the efforts by everyone are genuinely laudable, but relatively small-scale projects and measures, while welcome, unfortunately won't get us where we need to go, because the scale of the challenge is immense, as Dave said, and it requires dramatic system change at a national level to address it. But I believe that water quality is a really useful barometer for all of this in telling us about the wider ecosystem health. And I think it helps us to broaden out what I find to be sometimes a slightly narrow climate focus. We talk a lot about integrated catchment management, and we know that rivers are a product of their catchment. Why then are we not managing them at a catchment scale? Why are we not seeing catchment scale measures tailored to local conditions? We need to work with science, and what we know is that there's 50% too much nitrogen going into catchments like the Barrow and the Slaney. Logically, if we were really serious about protecting water quality, we would be putting catchment limits in place in those. There's only so much nitrogen one catchment can take, so let's use the science and the modelling and take a precautionary approach. Now, I acknowledge it's a complicated picture, but that does not absolve us from having to take the necessary action when the science is slapping us in the face. And similar with forestry, there are some catchments which should never be afforested, like the top 8 freshwater pearl mussel catchments. They should be returned to open peatland habitat if we want to protect that species. But why do we not have strategic spatial plans or catchment plans for forestry, a go-to area for planting, a don't-go area for planting, based on water quality, high nature value farmland, bird sensitivities? Where exactly are all of these trees that we are going to plant? Where are they to be planted? And what are the trade-offs on the environment and on the communities? I talked to lots of people in Leitrim, they don't want more trees near them. What are the trade-offs we're looking at here? And what is the price we're willing to pay as a nation so that we can achieve carbon neutrality for the agriculture industry, as described by Dave earlier? Now in conclusion, I know this is a complicated and emotionally charged picture. I'm not being flippant, it's not black and white. And there's an awful lot of opinions and there's not a lot of trust. Obviously, farmers own their land. They don't want to be told what to do. Completely respect that. I think I would be the same if I were a farmer. But what about our collective commons? Our waterways, the air we breathe, the atmosphere we live in, the birds and animals that we share the land with. How some industries use land, they're using land in a way that impacts on those commons, then surely we as a nation also need to have a say in what's happening in that. So ultimately, until we have an acknowledgement from all stakeholders on the scale of the problem and how dramatic the changes need to be, Dave, you referred to honesty, that there's maybe a lack of honesty telling farmers how far it is we have to go. Until we start having that discussion, we will fail to find the solutions. All you need to do is look at the story of water quality over the last 10 years. It's going down and down and down. And the question is no longer, should we fundamentally change how we manage land? All the science makes it obvious that we have to do this. It's no longer optional. So the important thing is how and where the changes need to happen and how we do it in a way that's fair and equitable. Rivers are the ultimate truth tellers. It's time to really listen to what they're telling us.